Also, Reinhard, wir haben ein Problem. Nur eins? Sigmar sei gepriesen. Wir müssen einen geografischen und politischen Überblick des gesamten Reiches verfassen. Ich hole einen Hexenjäger. Was? Wieso? Weil das Ketzerei ist, Müller. Kein Mensch kann das Reich vollständig erklären. Wer es versucht, der hat eindeutig Kontakt zu überbordenden Mächten. Nein, nein! Wir müssen das schaffen! Für den Reichstag! Für den Reichstag? Sie sollen Papier essen. Also gut. 11 große Provinzen, hunderte kleinere Herrschaften, unabhängige Städte, religiöse Enklaven, die Mutlen, Halblinge mit eigener Regierung. Sie haben Sitze im Reichstag. Sie essen den ganzen Tag was Städten, Müller, und doch stimmen sie über Reichsgesetze ab. Ich weiß. Gut. Beginnen wir mit Reikland, ja? Ja, Reikland. Zentrum von Macht, Kultur, Handel und offenem Abwasser. Heimat von Altdorf. Und korrupte Beamte mit Schreibtischen aus Gold und einem Bestand, der eher für einen Esel geeignet ist. Ach, oi, ich schreibe das nicht auf.
Reikland, translated literally to English, land of the river Reich, which is the original meaning of the name as the Unberogans called it, or Empire Land if we are speaking literal German, home of the Unberogans, which in modern times becomes the Grand Principality of Reikland. Current Elector Count, Emperor Karl Franz I von Holswig-Schliestein, Protector of the Empire, the Fire of the Dark, Sigmar's heir, Emperor of the South, Emperor himself, son of emperors, Elector Count of Reikland, Grand Prince of Reikland, Prince of Altdorf, Count of the West March, and possibly the best we have. If you manage to say all of that in one breath, congratulations, you are now legally an imperial diplomat. In a way, it is fitting that we discuss it first, as it was the first ever province of the Empire, as it was the very home of Sigmar himself, the first of his domain as he dreamed of uniting the tribes of the old world. But it's not first in just order, it is also first culturally, politically, economically, and in whatever way the dandies of this peacock's nest of a province want to convince you of. Reikland lies at the western edge of the Empire, enclosed by natural borders in the Grey Mountains to the west and south, and the River Reich to the north and east. It borders the Wasteland to the northwest, Middenland to the north, Talabek Land to the east, Sterlen and Wissenland to the southeast. It can be divided into 3 regions: the Grey Mountains, the foothill region of the Vorbekland, and the ever-dense, ever-infested Reikland Forest. As with many mountains in the Empire, the Grey Mountains are littered with the remains of dwarven structures and tunnels. Some holes like Karak Nord and Karak Ziflin remain as some of the last bastion of the dwarven people amidst a hostile sea of greenskins, skavens, and trolls. But despite the danger, the resources of the mountain are too bounteous to be left alone by Reikland, and so many mines have been established to partake of that sweet, sweet mineral goodness. There are 2 passes into Reikland through the Grey Mountains: the Axbite Pass, guarded by Helmgard, and the Grey Lady Pass, guarded by Ubersreich. The passes are guarded and tolled strictly to prevent human and non-human raiders, along with more unsavory folk like the Bretonnians, from wreaking havoc in Reikland. Those who are unwilling to cough up the coins for the toll may endeavor to brave the more rugged and dangerous routes, such as the Crooked Corridor or Durak Way. Sandwiched between the Grey Mountains and the Reikland Forest lies the rolling hills and valleys of the Vorbekland, literally foothill land or foothill country. Yes, for all their extravagant fashion and pompous showboating, the Reiklanders, and the Unberogans for that matter, were not known for their imaginative nomenclature. though their naming conventions and a lot of Warhammer fantasy naming conventions for their geography do mirror actual ones from our world. For example, the famous Torpenhow Hill in Cumbria, England. Though locals and experts claim that there is no such hill, it has been popularized too much to be properly discarded. It is made up of the words Tor from Old English, Pen from Celtic, and Hol from Danish, all of which translates to hill. So in full, Torpenhow Hill translates to hill, 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 hill. But I digress. Back to the Vorbeckland. The southeastern part of this region, called Sudenvorbeckland, or more imaginatively as Ronald's Garden, is known as the most fertile land in the province. It is both the breadbasket of the province and the wine cellar, though I wonder how fertile it is compared to the fields of Averland. Here, market towns like Ubersreich, Stemmingen, and Dunkelberg sprout like well-watered plants feeding off the fertile land, home to bustling trades, gossip, and perhaps even an incursion of Skaven, wave after wave of hungry, gibbering ratmen, like a tide on the beach, a tide of vermin, a vermin tide, if you will. But journey westward into the region, and you'll find the tone shifts rather dramatically. This end of the Vorbeckland is wilder, lonelier, and more prone to the kinds of visitations that involve greenskin warbands, beasts, and the sort of creatures that scholars from the Imperial Zoo describe as fascinating, just before they are devoured. Still, it remains a destination for brave hunters, mad naturalists, and people who like their hiking with a 60% mortality rate. One cannot talk about the fertility of the region without mentioning the rivers that allow said fertility to not shrivel up and be lost quicker than a Carillion player leaving a game once she gets the slightest bit of damage from a mildly strong breeze. They start from the Grey Mountains, which is admittedly not ideal, as it is rather easy for the dwarves to restrict access for the Imperials whenever they feel like it grudging time. In 2211 IC, during one particularly spirited disagreement with the Elector Count over mining rights, the dwarves dammed the rivers, cutting off water to half the region and triggering the infamous Randwater March of desperate, very thirsty peasants on Altdorf. Since then, Imperial authorities have taken great care to keep the dwarves of the Grey Mountains in good humor, which in practice means leaving them alone, paying their tolls, and agreeing that, yes, of course, that mountain was always dwarven land. Now we enter into one of, if not the, most prominent natural feature of the Empire: forest. We appropriately start with the Reikland forest, which is a tautology because Wald means forest already, so we're just saying Reich forest. Charming. It's a relatively gentler forest compared to the other dark green sea that covers much of the Empire. You have a higher chance of surviving here compared to the darker forests of the Dragwald, meaning you have much less of a chance of stumbling into some ancient horror that might even be older than the Empire itself. That's not to say it is safe, though. Heavens no. If you're unlucky or unwise enough to step off the beaten path, you will find yourself face to face, or face to snout, or face to whatever appendage the creature has, with bandits, beastmen, or some wild beast. Botanically, the Reichwald is a relatively serene blend of oak, pine, elm, and beech. Lovely for the painter, not so much for the peasant who's just trying to make it to Dunkelberg without becoming a snack. The trees are also courteous enough to let in a sliver of light, bestowing one with the kindness of being able to enjoy some sunlight, before being sacked by a bandit or beast. Something that will soon become a running theme with certain objects and structures in the province's natural scene: strange ancient stones dubbed oghams are scattered throughout the forest. What will also become a running theme with said strange objects and structures? No one really knows their purpose, nor their origin. Rumors say that they are sites of worship for primitive, isolated folks that live deep in the forest, performing rites older than even Sigmar himself. The magisters of the colleges of magic have taken quite an interest in them, which, considering it's the wizards, might either go relatively smooth, mediocrely mundane, or disastrously catastrophic. Nestled within the Reichwald are two hill regions, the Hegekryps and the Skag Hills. Sounds cozy, doesn't it? Sheep farming, honest mining work, that sort of thing. The Skag Hills are relatively straightforward. Rocks, sheep, the occasional goblin. The Hager Crypts, however, well, they attract a certain crowd. Treasure hunters, tomb robbers, necromantically inclined tourists, my kind of folks. They're said to be dotted with the burial sites of the pre-imperial Unbarokans, which may or may not be protected by vengeful spirits. Local shepherds sometimes report ghost sightings, but these are usually attributed to that potent vintage of Reikland bubbly, aged in fear, fermented in solitude, bottled with imagination. As a side note, I can't go over all the notable locations and settlements of the province because, good almighty God, there are a lot. I'll have them pop up on screen here for a few seconds and you can have a quick look at whichever you find most interesting. Do note, however, that this is not the trend with the other provinces. This is really only a Reikland thing, because it would appear that GW's writing team is composed almost entirely of these fashionably bombastic, imaginatively bankrupt, anthropomorphized peacocks. The people of Reikland are of course descended from the Unbarokans, an ancestry that really does not help in quelling their already monumental ego. They believe in their own natural, genetic abilities of leadership, often meddling in the other province's business, because to them, Sigmar made the Empire. We are descended from his tribe. Ergo, you should defer to us just like your ancestors deferred to ours. This insufferable behavior has earned them the reputation among the provinces akin to that one aunt of yours, who lectures you in family gatherings about how you should take care of your problems better, all while she barely has any knowledge of your day-to-day business. To their credit, the Reiklanders are jovial, affable, optimistic, and open-minded. They cheerfully point to their bounteous natural resources, their rate of literacy that doesn't just plummet deeper than the Skaven Undercity, and of course, that small footnote of being the descendants of Sigmar's own tribe. The Unbarokans gave birth to a god. What future could be so dim for a people so blessed? They inherit Sigmar's vision of imperial unity and hold to it very seriously, taking a perhaps too keen interest in the business of their kin. Foremost exporter of unsolicited advice, they shake their heads solemnly, muttering that someone really ought to do something whenever some unfortunate fate befalls the other provinces. Again, to their credit, they more often than not will answer that call themselves. The young nobles, probably half bored, half excited to make a name and fortune for themselves, eagerly enlist in the military, often having a fast track to commanding positions simply for being a Reiklander, much to the ire of the other provinces. Even though they are thought of as pretentious, they sincerely believe that it is their duty to come to the defense of their less fortunate kinsmen. The ideal of expansion is still widely entertained by the Reiklanders, some pressing for war against Bretonnia to reclaim the West March, some advocating for the Emperor to have more freedom from the electors. A rather obvious ploy by the merchants to have unitary trade laws implemented across the Empire, therefore earning them more profit. We should just boot all these snakes back to Marienburg. At their worst, Reiklanders are precisely what one would expect of a people who believe themselves descended from a god. Arrogant, ostentatious, and perpetually rowdy. They are slaves to fashion, yet drunkards to the bone, a curious mixture of silk and spirit. Indeed, it is said in parts of the Empire that even the flies in Reikland's taverns have a nose for ale, earning the ignoble name of Reikflies for their uncanny ability to sniff out even the faintest trace of spilled drink. Their men are notorious across the Empire, not merely for their flamboyant wardrobes, but for their rather scandalous proclivities. Accusations of wife-stealing, pig-bothering, and general philanderous debauchery are common. More than one Talabiklander husband has found his woman seduced by the charming words and dashing look of a Reiklander dandy. The women, meanwhile, enjoy a reputation for breathtaking beauty, paired with Hollywood celebrity vanity. The sort of person who always manages to turn the conversation towards their wealth, their superiority, and their wealth. As a people, Reiklanders are loud, opinionated, and utterly convinced of their own superior taste. In politics, in war, really anything under the sun. They are known to be impatient in all things, preferring swift victories and early returns. When war looms, they rally to the Emperor's banner in impressive numbers, if only so they can get it over with quickly and be home in time for supper. So many have joined the war effort, in fact, that some fear there may soon be no one left to harvest the grain or cut firewood. The capital of the province is Altdorf, the city of spires, current seat of the Emperor Karl Franz von Holswig-Schliestein. Before we even get into this glorious mess of a city, I would like to apologize about not being able to go into too much details for the city here. The Reikland section is already longer than the other provinces by a fair bit, and Altdorf itself has even more information than its own province. We'll take a full tour of Altdorf another time, in the future. Maybe. Hopefully. But for now, we'll just go over some of its notable features and structures. Altdorf, being the de facto seat of imperial governance and the de jure capital since the election of Emperor Wilhelm III in 2429 IC, attracts all sorts of individuals from all corners of the old world and beyond. Akin to the River Reich itself, gold, resources, orders, and more flow into and out of the city. And just like any river, it carries mud and silt as well. Chaos cultists, thieves, bandits, spies, assassins, and all sorts of unsavory folk. In between the beautiful towering spires and buildings lie dark corners and alleyways where the less fortunate tread carefully, lest they find themselves bereft of possessions or in Moor's garden, courtesy of Altdorf's resident criminals. The streets are a winding mess, some dark and narrow, some wide and relatively clean, at least by human standards. But of course, as the city and the empire itself is approaching a true industrial revolution, that means the less unglamorous aspects of said revolution is also quite evident in the city. As Victorian England, and London in particular, was a simultaneous marvel of human architecture and a monument to misery, so is Altdorf a mixture of the light of civilization and a potent stink of sewage and poverty. The streets outside of the richer neighborhoods are dirty, dusty, and often dangerous, with pickpockets, burglars, and charlatans blending in with the crowd. To add to the packed atmosphere, the smell of sweat, musk, and sewage is thick in the air, a truly industrial perfume for an industrial people. The gutters often overflow with rainwater and refuse. Just to top it all off, the soot and smoke of industry makes breathing that much harder. One must not gawk too much at the sights, splendor, and squalor of the city, for one risks losing either one's pocket, one's throat, or both, perhaps even at the same time.
What's that? Ratsmen? What an utterly charming idea you have, my dear fellow. I understand the boredom of the countrysides may engender such imaginative fancies, but we city folks are, how do I say, more enlightened. Underneath Altdorf lays a subterranean city of ratsmen? Why did you come and share your story to the pleasant-looking fellow with the rather fetching tall hat over there? I'm sure he would be able to liberate you of such silly superstition.
But for as abundant as the squalor is, that is not all the city has to offer. Aside from the political centers of the imperial court, palace, and such like, the city is also one of the foremost center of learning in the empire, indeed, in the old world even, rivaled only by Nord. The University of Altdorf is the highest class of education one can receive in the empire, with many students flocking from all corners of the old world to crowd the lecture rooms. But if mere abstract academics is not your cup of tea, fear not. There is also the Imperial Engineer School, founded by the legendary Leonardo da Miragliano himself. Without doubt, the most intelligent human to ever walk the world, bar none. Some of humanity's most ingenious inventions originate from this grand institution, including the steam tank, the Hellstorm rocket battery, the Hellblaster volley cannon, the Herster Wenkler pigeon bomb, the Michaelis equine effigy of dynamic locomotion, Ferrara's astounding subterranean drilling momentum facilitator, Von Brunel's magnificent subhydro velocipator of proven durability, and last, but certainly not least, Leon Toddmeister's fantabulously far-reaching harquebus of unforeseeable and unperceived bereavement. And of course, one cannot speak about learning without mentioning the famous and infamous Colleges of Magic, founded by the Emperor Magnus the Pious, alongside that walking glass cannon nuclear warhead with the physical constitution of soggy tissues, Teclis, High Elven Lore Master of Hoeth. As magic was a big no-no in the Empire for millennia, the founding of the colleges was hotly opposed by the people and the cults. Though no matter how much the cults of Sigmar froze a fit about the heretical wizards, Magnus the Pious understood the necessity and usefulness of magic after the Great War against Chaos, so he would not be swayed. Magic was finally legalized in the Empire, though only for the registered magisters of the Colleges of Magic. Hedge wizards and independent practitioners are given the choice to either be tested and sanctioned by the colleges or burned at the stake. Those with the necessary talent for one of the 8 winds will be guided, taught, and watched heavily in their respective order, before being sanctioned as full magisters or battle wizards. The witch hunters have to hold back the bile and froth that threaten to spill from their mouths every time they have to come into contact with these licensed practitioners. Entertainment, too, is not lacking. Taverns, theaters, carnivals, and even the Imperial Zoo, holding many fantastic creatures from all corners of the planet, including even a dragon. But what is a city without spirit to keep the soul from rot? To that end, temples of the Empire's many cults are spread throughout the city, tending to the spiritual hygiene of its citizenry. Foremost among them is the Holy Temple of Sigmar, the largest and grandest in the Empire, seat of the Grand Theogenes, and the beating, burning heart of Sigmarite devotion. Pilgrims come from far and wide to walk its echoing halls, where the hammer of the faithful strikes ever against the anvil of heresy. This is Altdorf, the crown of the Empire, a fine example of the spirit of the old world, cracked, corrupt, clinging to hope, yet ever defiant and ever proud.